So you went from redundancy and debt straight into COVID.
Fans are so self-absorbed.
Yeah, we might stop, so it's not keeping the lights on.
But at the end of the day, that's their problem, isn't it?
People buy into authenticity, and it's a massive thing.
Don't go in there swinging your dick around. Angus Kinnear is the worst CEO in football.
Hello, welcome to the Podcasters Podcast. Today we're joined by a special guest. We're joined by Dan. How are you, Dan?
Very good, thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Dan Moylan is the host and the owner of the Square Ball.
Yeah,
is that how it works?
Yeah, there are a team of 5 of us who own the business now. But yeah, I'm the host of the podcast. Was the guy who kind of kicked it all off because of background in radio, just to fill in the gaps, and said to the lads, should we do a podcast? Because I used to like listening to The Guardian's Football Weekly. And yeah, 2010 it was when we kicked off the podcast. Said, should we give this a go? See if we can do a Leeds one of this.
So you've been podcasting 14 years?
Yeah, a long time.
Bloody hell. Take us back to the start then.
Yeah, so to rewind and tell the story, the Square Ball is a print fanzine that was born in 1989, Leeds United fanzine at that. And in 2009, web forums and chat rooms had basically consumed the way that the magazine was being put together. People were just cutting and pasting things, in the same way that if you were cutting and pasting things from, let's say, Twitter or Reddit now into a magazine, it was all out there already. It was finishing off the fanzine in its current guise. So in 2009, in that summer, we were all on a chat room, a chat forum, and this team of us came together and said, should we save this fanzine? Should we stop it dying out? Because the owner of Leeds at that time was a guy called Ken Bates, a malevolent previously Chelsea owning owner. I'll try and rein my language in so we don't get in trouble.
No, you're fine. You can swear as much as you want.
Ken Bates was not very well liked, let's say. So there was very much a sort of an angry protest sort of vibe to all this. We want to stick it to the man, that kind of thing. So we started that in 2009. Running parallel to all this was years back out of university, I ended up as a nightclub and bar DJ, which led eventually into radio, which gave me access to a broadcast studio. So I said to the lads, so I was pretty crap at radio at the time when we started the podcast. And I was like, well, if I can't get far in that, then let's give this a go and make use of this amazing facility that we've got available, which was Radio Air in Leeds, like the local sort of commercial station. So I had 24-hour access with a key fob. And there were sort of 4 or 5 broadcast standard studios, and the way that radio's gone, far less output has been coming from local stations over the last 10 or 15 years. So I was like, let's use it. Let's go use it. So we went in there off the back of Leeds' famous victory at Old Trafford against Manchester United in 2010. It was the day after that we sat down and we just started recording and would see where it took us. And it's lasted this long. And I got further in radio. I got better at it a little bit anyway. And stepped away from it for sort of 4.5, 5 years or something like that, because I was in Newcastle doing a drive time show on a large regional station there. But it was the same company, so I still had building access to all the buildings in the group. So as that started coming to an end, the radio, I stepped back into the podcast. So we're talking about 2018. So I was driving down from Newcastle, finishing my show at 7 o'clock. Arriving back in Leeds at like 9 o'clock, and then we were stepping into the studio on Monday nights at like 9 o'clock.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, to try and make a go of it, because I said to the lads, look, my job's going to go here, so we can lean into this and try and make a thing of it, see if we can turn this into a real thing. And luckily enough, it did take off. I got made redundant in September 2019, so it was just pre-pandemic, by which time we'd established quite a sizable audience. And it started been running on and off, sometimes infrequently. We'd started out fortnightly. It sometimes got less frequent than that. But then it was 2018 when we went, let's go weekly. And from there we built like a second weekly show and a subscriber offering and things like that. So we took it from this kind of bit part secondary thing that existed as part of a fanzine. And it's just gone far bigger than I ever anticipated. And
Why?
It's now a full-time job.
Why did you think you was going to lose your job?
It's probably too technical and long and boring for this show, but...
So I've got Ash on it. They're used to boring.
So Ofcom, the government's communications arm, its watchdog, sets the parameters for how much local radio has to come from the area where the transmitter is. So if you're in Leeds, there's a transmitter in Leeds. So that means that the studios, a certain amount of content has to come out of studios within that area. It's called the TSA, Total Survey Area. So the law used to be 12 hours a day, and then they reduced it down to 10, and then they reduced it down to 7. So in effect, what that meant is if you used to listen to like Heart or Capital or any of the sort of the old legacy stations, they would have a local breakfast show and then a local drive time show. And that's the time that I kind of did well in radio when that happened. So that's your 7 hours, 4 at breakfast, 3 at drive time. That's the minimum requirements from your local area. While I was doing that drive time show, they dropped that to 3 hours. So that meant in due course, what does every big sort of legacy media company do? Well, it tries to make savings where it can. So they, made, I think it was like 10 or 15 drive time jocks unemployed because they networked the drive time show. So I knew that was going to come down the track. As soon as they dropped it from 7 hours of local requirement to 3, I thought, well, I know which way this is going. They're not going to get rid of the breakfast show ahead of me. They'll put the breakfast show on drive, or the breakfast show will survive, one of the two. So I was like, right, I know this is coming down the track. I got about another 18 months out of it in radio. But my time in radio was incredibly valuable. I knew it was going to end, and then when it did, it was kind of a bit of a mercy killing, to be perfectly honest, because I was struggling. I was burnt out from driving to Newcastle back and forth every day, up to my eyeballs in debt as well. So it kind of had to work. So we leaned into the podcast properly, and thankfully, did make it work. And it's turned into a merch operation and all sorts of things now. So we've still got the print fanzine, still exists, and we've been in charge of that for, what are we now, for like 15 years. So I had 20 years prior to us, 15 years with us, and hopefully it continues as well. And obviously print is a bit of a struggle compared to like audio or video these days. We live in a video world, but I think we just jumped on it at the right time. And knowing it was going to end, I thought I can apply this radio stuff to podcasting. I feel like I know how it's done to a certain extent.
What were the lessons? What overlapped between radio and podcasting?
There are so many lessons. Know your audience, I think, was one of the key lessons. Is know who it is that you're speaking to, and always put them first. And I think it's easy to not put your audience first without realizing it, and it's a constant battle to do that, because you'll know what it's like when you're sat in a studio and you're talking about a thing, and you'll be bantering back and forth, bouncing off each other brilliantly. It's quite difficult in that moment to think, is this going to work for the audience, or is this just us being self-indulgent? And I think it's a really fine balance to strike. Because I heard a podcast recently, and I won't say which one it was, but they had a guest on who I really wanted to listen to, and I tuned into this podcast, and there was a 10-minute preamble leading up to the start of speaking to the guest.
Nothing worse.
They were talking about things within their own lives. It was a let's say, whatever your favourite musical is. It wasn't that, because I don't want to identify what the show was, but they were talking about musicals effectively for sort of 10 minutes before they led into this topic, and their guest was nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I think you need to learn how to speak to new listeners all the time and factor them into your thinking all the time, because when you get in a show that's established and you have that chemistry and it's so much fun to do, it's easy to be exclusive to new listeners. So I was tuning into that show to hear the guest. I had no interest in these people, but they spent 10 minutes kind of, and I'm doing air quotes, wasting my time talking about things I had no interest in. And they'd forgotten that people were there for the guests, not for them. So the big takeaway was, remember your new listeners, and that's how you grow a show as well, is by speaking to new people. So it's fine just catering to the ones that are already listening, already tuning into your show and already love it and like your banter, but that's exclusive to people who don't. So it's
a balance, right?
It's a balance between the two things, is the new listeners and the established listeners. And it's great having the established listeners who love you, but it's the new ones that make your show grow. So if you want to grow a show, speak to them all the time, or try and remind yourself. And I would say, we don't always get it right on our show. These are just sort of theoretical concepts that I remind myself of all the time, but it was drilled into me in the radio. New listeners. So you learn to reset on topics. So if you run a feature on your show, for example, you need to be able to explain that feature to someone who's new, who's coming in. You're not just putting it on there for the people who already love your show.
100%.
Yeah, and features are great because, benchmarks, they call them in radio, benchmark features. So if you've got a competition on your breakfast show at 8 o'clock every morning, people know to tune in to that benchmark. Similar sort of thing with podcasts. People can love them in the same way. It offers sort of comfort and familiarity, doing something that they recognise. But if somebody new comes in, imagine them listening to it for the first time. It has to make sense to them, and it has to appeal to them as well to keep them coming back. And it's the coming back that you have to look after most of all if you want to grow.
There's two types of marketing when it comes to podcasting. It is retention and growth, and the way you approach them is completely different. And a lot of that comes down to the content as well. That fills into it, because when we talk to people and they're like, "Oh, review our show" or something, one of the things that more or less everyone does is have a really long preamble or really long intro, and it's like, get to the content quicker, because guess what? Your existing audience don't want to hear the same repeated bit over and over again. But then actually, if you do a piece at the very start, which only appeals to your existing audience, well, you're blocking out all of the people that are new and finding you there.
Yeah.
So it's finding something that gets straight into the content. It's like, this is the show, let's get straight into it. Like, we haven't really done an intro for this. What we'll do is afterwards, we'll record a 30-second intro saying, oh, we talked about X, Y, Z. Dan revealed X, Y, Z. Let's get into it. So it's easy to listen to if someone from your podcast from the Square Ball goes, oh, I want to know a bit about behind the scenes of the Square Ball.
Absolutely,
then they're not going to listen to me and him chatting shit for half an hour before getting
that's
started.
it, get to the content. And so Tom, who's my boss, so I went out for beers with him last weekend, and he's remained a friend, even though he ultimately was the one who fired me.
Nice.
But he's a really good guy. He taught me a hell of a lot in such a short space of time, and I think I was so interested in all the theory and science of it, so I kind of hoovered it all up as much as I could, as quickly as I could, because my journey in radio, which sounds a bit wanky and X Factor, but it was short, but I kind of burned bright, but very quickly, and it was over again, like 4 or 5 years. But he taught me so much in that time, which was just get to the content. People do not want to hear you being self-indulgent. So you know when you tune into a radio station and they'll go, it's 14 degrees outside today. Thanks for having me on. I hope you're having a good day. It's what Tom used to describe as radio noise. It's just the DJ making noise that just does. It means nothing. If you want to see the weather, you can look on your phone. You can look out the window.
Most people are listening to the radio while driving, which has
Yeah.
you're outside.
Says it on-
Like, I know it's fucking raining.
Yeah, exactly. And so, do you need to deliver anything that your traffic app is not already telling you?
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody's got sat nav in the car now or on the phone, so you don't need to like. So I just used to, when I was doing travel reports, it was like, stuff in the usual spots. But if you spot anything out of the ordinary, just give me a call. And that was it, in and out, fast as you can. Just don't hang around on irrelevant stuff. And just to go back to the point of your new listeners and your old listeners, it's a really delicate balance between it being about you and not about you, because people will come back because they love you and feel part of something, like they know you, like be it mates in the pub, which is very much kind of the thing that we aim at on our show. But the new ones don't know you, so you have to make them love you. So you can't make it about yourself at the start, but then you have to make it about yourself so they do love you. So it's just remembering that and striking that really fine balance. But that's where I think like character definition as well within podcasts can really, really help. Again, another kind of lesson from radio. So when I was on the Drive Time show, I used to cover the breakfast show as well. And the breakfast show in the Northeast is still going. Brilliant breakfast show. Steve and Karen, and they've been on air for 20 years, and they're just irreplaceable in terms of their heritage, on the radio. So Ruth, who was my newsreader on the Drive Time show, we got paired up on breakfast. And it was really kind of important to tell people who we are. And part of that was we're not Steve and Karen, and was to constantly acknowledge them when we were sitting in for them. But also to almost bullet point out your own characters, if that makes sense. So anybody who is tuning in can pick up on these sort of characteristics within the show. So the characters we had on that show were, I was the kind of slightly browbeaten married man, father of two. She was the childless Bridget Jones who couldn't keep a man kind of thing. So, I mean, obviously you don't necessarily have something like that on a sports podcast, but you can see how dividing your characters up so people can easily
Different
identify with
personalities.
them. Yeah, and it's something we've applied to our show. I mean, I know you listen to our show, Ash, but Ken, you don't. But I would hope that you could tune into it and quickly start to identify characteristics about the people that are on the show. So Michael, who is the funny one on the show, like I'm the kind of ringmaster, hold it together, keep it moving forward. Michael's the funny one. So I know I can tee him up for something funny based around the characteristics that we've kind of exposed across the years.
Is that planned in a way? Do you ever talk about that between yourselves?
No, it's just chemistry takes time.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be crap at the start, I think, is another lesson I've probably learned. Yeah. Like when I went into doing that drive time show in Newcastle, I wasn't very good, but Tom, my old boss, gave me the space to learn and improve. And by the time I left there, sort of 4.5, 5 years later, I was like, right, the imposter syndrome's gone now. I understand that I'm all right at this, to a fairly decent level. And I've been able to take that forward into the podcasting realm as well. That we know what our characters are, but it's taken 14 years to know what those characters are.
It takes time to learn it, doesn't it? And then when we speak to people who are like, we run training for people to learn how to podcast, and there'll be people who meet each other there and be like, oh, we're going to be co-hosts. And you're like, co-hosts, for us it works. We've been friends before we were here. You and Michael obviously built a really good relationship. You can't just do it with a random person.
No.
Or you can. It takes a long time to build that kind of rapport and be able to do it in a way that people enjoy. Even when we first started, it was probably a lot more like, I don't know, how would you describe it?
Button up corporate
Button up,
in a
yeah.
way. Like you put on a facade a little bit, don't you? You're like, oh, I should be a more professional version of me.
Did you find yourselves imitating what you'd heard other people do?
Probably.
in the same sort of space.
Probably. And the worst thing is we tell people not to do that and then was doing it ourselves.
But I did it in radio as well. I wanted to sound like all the people that I liked. So I hear things and I want to be like that. So I'd imitate what I heard. But then eventually when you find your own voice, you relax. And that's when all the chemistry comes through, I think, afterwards. It's when you know what your own voice is. And there is no way around that. It just takes time.
Yeah, it's a bit different in the industry you're in, but for us, podcasting is to generate business. And I think there was the fear that if we come across as like jokey and relaxed, people won't take it seriously. But I could confidently say we get more business since being like that than when we were button up, if you know what I mean. So it is, people buy into authenticity, and it's a massive thing.
I was going to say authenticity it's irreplaceable.
Yeah. What was the biggest thing in 2018 that you feel like you changed to go, okay, we're taking this more serious?
It was the need for me to have a job, but also it's when, I mean, you'll know as well, but for any football fans or non-football fans, probably they explain it. And again, this goes back to resetting for people who don't know what we're talking about, and is possibly a decent example of it. Marcelo Bielsa, maverick Argentinian manager, comes into Leeds United, the likes of which we've never seen before and we'll probably never see again. Again, talking about authenticity, have you ever seen a more authentic football manager than Bielsa? He runs counter to all the things that dominate football, like money and the cult of personality, and he wants to make it beautiful. And I just had a moment where I thought, I can't miss this. I can't miss documenting this. I want to be part of this. I want to tell this story. I want to be part of it and kind of ride that same wave, because something's going to happen to Leeds here. And I want to be there when it does. And it did, and it was amazing. And actually that time, especially because it happened with COVID, gave us so much credit in the bank to chart that journey. And, we were remotely podcasting rather than in a studio during COVID. But so many people had so little else to do. Just like, and the number of people that you see now who will say to you, you helped me through COVID. I was like, did we? I had no idea. We were doing something to pass the time. And it was a good distraction from a really difficult time for everybody.
100%. I mean, podcasting in COVID blew up, and the fact you were doing that before, so you were already going into it as an experienced podcaster, definitely is great, right? Because I saw something the other day that actually only now has it started increasing the amount of active podcasts since COVID. So for the last, 3 years, 4 years, there's not been any more active podcasts, which shows what happened in COVID, right? Yeah. So for you guys, that must have been brilliant, especially with Leeds fans and the way that Leeds fans are, missing that sense of like being in the ground, talking to the other fans, and like, here's my dose.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's something that I think that's the whole tone of our show. Really, is to feel like you're part of something. We want you to come in and be like part of our club, if you like. So you could be sat talking to us in the pub, and I think that's one of the things that was taken away with COVID, wasn't it? The ability to socialise. And and you've got to remember at the time, nobody knew when it was going to end. It felt like being trapped in a prison. So if you could get outside those walls, and even virtually, like through a podcast, then why not? And it was the making of us as well. We sold a lot of merch off the back of getting promoted. We put together a print summer special, like a thick bookazine thing, and both made us loads of money, which we were then able to reinvest into equipment, which then led to a studio. And we just kept those incremental upgrades going, and it's kind of taken us to where we are today.
So you went from redundancy and debt straight into COVID, pretty much, which sounds pretty terrifying. Yeah. How long did it take from when you went, okay, this is me full time now, to then getting back into like a better position?
So just to and I don't mind talking about this because it's part and parcel of the journey. But I ended up in therapy that summer, because I was burnt out from doing the radio for, like I said, 4 or 5 years it was. And, I was spending 4 hours on the road, going up and down to Newcastle every day on my own, wasn't seeing my wife and kids. They'd go off to school. My wife would go off to work. So I was in the house rattling around on my own for a couple of hours, drive to Newcastle, spend an hour chatting to people in the office, but then I have to go prep a show in the studio, sat in the studio on my own. Then everybody goes home, sort of 5, 6 o'clock. So I'm in an empty building. And then I drive home for 2 hours on my own, and you've got nothing but your thoughts, and you're absolutely awash with adrenaline. And you'll know what it's like if you ever get that kind of adrenaline up and down. And if it's every day, and you are relentlessly mining whatever is left of your life for content, because there wasn't much left outside of that, then it wasn't a great position to be in, just spending that much time on my own. And by the time the time that the podcast came to an end. The radio came to an end before the podcast. Yeah, and I needed help, and I realised, and that kind of landed with me that Christmas when I had 3 months of redundancy. Money ran out in the January. Like, lads, if I don't make a proper go of this now, if I can't take a wage out of this now, we're making a bit of money, it's going to be never, and I'm going to have to go get a real job, which sounded like a terrible idea. You know, after you've done 5 years of the radio, going and doing a real job sounded like just a horrendous thing. And I've never been cut out for it. You know, like I went into nightclub DJing and bar DJing. It's just never appealed to me, doing 9 to 5. But I didn't know where else to turn. So it was like, I will lean into the thing that I know best and just hope that it works. So yeah, it was about the new year of that, just heading into COVID. So it was
just before
2019, 2020, yeah. Please, can I take a salary out of this? And then we just built it over the course of that time. So I took a salary out of it. And then the others started joining one by one and left their jobs and just came into it. And yeah, we've got a team of 7 now. So it went all right.
How did you first start monetizing?
Just through being on Acast. So we were on Acast way back when they first launched in the UK. We were doing sufficient numbers, I suppose, to pique their interest. And they just said, do you want to come and be with us? So we said, yeah. And they've been, good for us of Acast. You know, we're doing sort of 5 figures out of them every month, like from ad and sponsorship revenue on top of the stuff that we sell for ourselves. So yeah, it's been great. And I suppose it's the Coca-Cola of platforms, isn't it? In terms of its reach and its worldwide recognition. So yeah, selling that amount of stuff without lifting a finger is great.
That's where there's quite a big difference in your sort of podcast with the podcast we work with mostly is a lot of the people we're working with have a few hundred downloads, and it's how do you get the most out of that few hundred downloads, and you're selling coaching courses or mentoring. And some of them, we've got people making 6 figures a year with less than 1,000 downloads a week, like quite a few people in that bracket. But then if they were to rely on someone like Acast, they'd be getting paid absolute pennies.
Yeah.
So for you, I know you have some good sponsorship. What's the difference between kind of what Acast pay you and what they pay you? Is there like a rough difference?
Probably it's about equal. Like,
really?
Yeah, 6 figures we get from Acast in a year, and it's, again, similar from sponsorships. So yeah, and that's on top of doing subs as well, which we moved on to, which was one of the things that we did, I think quite early on when we went weekly. So we launched the weekly Square Ball podcast, and then we said, let's do this thing called the Extra Ball, and we charged £3 a month. So it's the Patreon model, but we wanted to do it ourselves because we wanted to control the data.
Okay. How's that going, by the way? Because we've got experience with someone doing that and it being an absolute pain in the arse trying to control it.
It's been quite a journey, yeah. but as the sort of, so we're hosted on our website is hosted on WordPress, and if you are familiar with WordPress, it's a plugin jungle. You know, you can end up with thousands of plugins. As it's grown, we've employed we've contracted out to a proper web engineer who knows how this stuff works, so can take good plugins and make them work for us. So we use it was like memberships, and at one stage we used groups and things like that. But essentially, we control everything with a memberships plugin now on our own website. So it was heavy going at first, but I think we were charging like recurring payments through Stripe. And that's improved. The WordPress offering has improved and kind of caught up with what we wanted to do. So as we've grown, and the repeat payments have become easier to sort of facilitate. But yeah, it's been a pain in the arse. There's no two ways about that. But it also means that we can sell to those people in our shop, and we sell a lot of merch as well. And again, we used to contract out the merch, but we brought that back in house because our merch provider actually went bust, owing us I think it's 20 grand out of pocket. Yeah. But then again, we've saved a lot of money by bringing the merch in house ourselves. So we've run that out. We've got a little office in Leeds, so we run most of that ourselves. But again, that's 6 figures now as well. So
on the membership, do you only have the one tier?
So we've got the legacy, the historic Extra Ball tier, which was £3 a month. But now we've got what we call TSB Plus, which sounds like a bank account.
Yeah,
it's not the sexiest name.
Is it trademarked?
We haven't looked into that yet. Don't tip them off. Yeah. But our model has always been like best stuff free. So if it's the cake analogy. So like the stuff we put up behind the paywall it's the cherry and the icing on top of the cake, but the cake is still free. So if you want the best of us, you can get it all for free if you want. And then it's like, if you love us and you want to support us, then you can subscribe and you get at least an extra weekly show. Sometimes it'll be 2. And we're in the process now, I think, as we've grown, we're at a point where I want to refine that membership offer and the stuff that's behind the paywall. So TSB Plus, if you pay annually, is £60. It's £5 a month. Or you can pay, I think it's $6.99 a month if you want to do it monthly. So it's great because you get that big chunk of revenue in from the people who subscribe on the annual plan. So you've got a degree of safety built into it, I suppose. So yeah, we're now sort of padding out that offering. But for that offering, you also get discounts on the merch, which is nice because like the super fans who really like us want to buy stuff from us anyway. So we can incentivize them to buy stuff from us. They get priority access on merch. Like we did a live event just before Christmas, which was amazing. They get priority access on the tickets, so we get all the people who really love us the most buying the tickets for that kind of thing. And you also get like a daily email as well, which is great. So we've got some really talented writers like in the team. So you get this daily email that just like, and the premise of that is if you can't be asked to troll Twitter or X, whatever it is these days, because it's just full of mad shit, you can just get this email and read through it, spend 20 minutes reading through it if you want. Sometimes it'll be 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10, but Leeds is a club that never sleeps. It's wild. Yeah. It's wild. So there's always something to write about. So you get all this in this package, and I think it's pretty good value for money, to be honest.
100%.
How many members do you have, roughly?
Yeah, we've got I think it's about 3,500, something like that.
That is crazy, isn't it?
So in terms of streams of income, then you've got the ads through Acast, you've got sponsorship separately, you've got merch, you've got the TSB Plus. Is there any others, or is that the 4?
That's the main. Yes, we've got live events as well, which we can do. We can bring in maybe a few grand from doing live events. But again, we're just stretched too thinly at the minute, so we struggle to put together like more live events because it involves just devoting mental capacity to how do you turn a podcast with these particular features into a live show. It's a different beast completely. But when we do it, it's always so much fun. Like we did 500 and something tickets, I think it was, just prior to Christmas. We did a big Christmas quiz, which was great fun. Like the lads from BBC Radio Leeds, who have the football commentary, came along and they were on the other team to us. And it was just great. And we even involved the sponsors as well were part of that show, and they had front row seats.
Nice.
And you'll know from if you've listened, there's kind of a running joke now about the big three services that Levi Solicitors, which is our oldest sponsor, they offer is Will's Probate Conveyancing. So we had a lectern that we borrowed from them, and on the front of it we put Will's Probate Conveyancing. So it was like just a nice little nod to them.
To be fair, we should credit you for our ad reads, actually. We're sponsored by Riverside, who, as long as we do a good intro to this after the episode, they should have an ad read. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But we try and take a similar approach because I've listened to a load of podcasts and I much prefer your style of ad read, and I don't skip it, compared to other ones where it's the same one repeated every time. So if it's a baked-in ad, we try and make a joke of it every time. Like, whatever the episode is about, we'll link it to Riverside somehow. We'll be like, oh, what's your favourite feature? And he'll be like, oh, the privacy policy is fantastic. So just taking the piss. But to be fair, I owe a lot of credit to you and the guys for how you've done your ad reads, because we thought, actually, that's a really unique way of doing it. And as it happens, Riverside have renewed with us. They're having a great time. They're paying us loads of money. It's great.
They said they haven't given anybody as much freedom as us.
Well, and then this is the thing, though. Again, going back to lessons learned from radio, this was it's one of those theoretical lessons I learned in a book from radio. And it's like when you're interviewing guests, you need to make sure that your guests come and live in your world. You don't occupy theirs. So you've got your little ecosystem and the dynamic in the studio. They come and be part of that. And it's the same. That's the same approach I took to speaking about Levi's and the read there. They need to be part of our ecosystem, not this thing that lives outside it. Because how many times do you hear on a podcast, it's a really sterile read for something, and you kind of go, well, I know you're reading from a script, and I'm just skip.
It's just shit. It's boring.
And as you say, if you can welcome them into your world and make it part of the content, if you like, then they are going to be less prone to skipping it. We try and get it done as quickly as possible as well, because, again, you've got to be respectful and put your audience first and realise people listen to adverts on podcasts. They understand that the reads pay the bills, but it's also within their gift to skip them as well. So if you want to skip
Can't take the piss.
That's fine. But if I make my read interesting enough and good enough or humorous or create little memes and recurring jokes and things like that, people will tune in. And one of the things that we have is that Michael, who sits on the show, is never prepared for the read, and it sounds like he's taking the piss, and he's not. He's genuinely just never prepared.
Is he? I don't watch the video version, but I'm assuming he's getting up the website every single time.
He's doing it as we say it, so we'll start recording, and it's almost like the penny drops at the last minute, and he'll go, "All right, I need to do the read." Shit, and he'll call up the website as I'm saying it, and even though we do it every time when we do it, we've done it, we do it hundreds of times a year, he's still never quite ready. But that's kind of become a joke in itself, so he'll always fall back on the big three are Will's Probate and Conveyancing. So it's audience first, and hopefully there are enough people who have seen that or heard that and appreciate that it's part of the commercial landscape is just necessary, but won't skip it because they'll go, well, they can make me laugh in a different way, one more time, how will they go from that into the show kind of thing. So,
we'll often not know who's doing the read when we start, and one person will just pass it to the other, like, oh, well, I'm doing the read today, is it? And then, or I'll be speaking and you'll be on the website, be like, so they have this new feature. It's like zero preparation.
But that's the sign, I think, of a good client as well, who will say, do you know what, we'll back off. You know your show best.
Yeah.
Go and do what you do best, which is to be yourselves, as you said. Like, when 100%. You become more authentic, it lands so much better. So if you can make them understand that you know this space best and your audience best, and they can get on board with it, then you'll get so much more back in terms of returns. And we know, like, Levi's
100%.
love the reads. They love them.
Yeah.
And they get a huge, like, return on investment is about 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they get 5 times?
Yeah.
What they pay you? Wow.
How long have they been a sponsor?
Oh, right back to when we first got sponsors. So I can't remember when we first brought them on board. But, yeah, they've got Leeds fans within the directorship and the partners in the business who kind of said, should we give this a go? And,
nice.
The rates have gone up as time's gone on. But
I was going to say, they're brave telling you how much they make. Oh, well, our prices have just gone to 4 times what they were.
That's exactly what we said to them. Yeah, why have you told us that? We're going to charge you more now. But they love it because as soon as they, as long as they get a return on it, they're going to be happy.
Yeah.
And West Yorkshire Electrical is a sort of similar sort of regional firm who came on board as a result of hearing the reads for Levi's. And it was no more complex than me saying on the show, look, we've got a slot coming up for a sponsor. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Nice.
Get in touch with us, and they did. And Jamie, who runs West Yorkshire Electrical, again, fully on board with it. We went to the pub with him about a month ago and just sat and had lunch, overlooking like sort of the Yorkshire Dales, and just had a chat about it and a laugh. And it was great. And he really enjoys what we do, and he's in that same world. Like, again, speaking about characters within the show, Michael is. He pretends he knows everything about everything, but in a kind of really self-effacing, piss-taking way. So he has mended his own roof genuinely, and it's beautiful that West Yorkshire Electrical have a dedicated team of roofers within their team. So it's perfect. So what am I going to talk about? Well, I'm going to talk about Michael mending his own roof. So why would do you want Michael to mend your roof, or do you want the professionals?
Nice. Yeah.
So when you get your solar panels done, and as it happens, Michael had solar panels on his house beforehand. So we've got this where we can tap into the character and the sponsor, which to me feels so much more fun and interesting than just going off a script. And you can hear the scripted ones.
Do you know what? I heard one that was even worse the other day, and it was just, thanks to this company for sponsoring the episode. And then they got into it. I was like, I don't know what that company does. You've not done them any sort of justice there. Right. They're paying you. You've just said their name, and that is it. Like,
ABC Solutions.
Yeah, it's like, so, well, what are they solving?
And that's the other thing. A lot of the scripts you get are going to be crap.
When there's a company that insists on it, so when we started with Riverside, we was like, give us some pointers, but that's all we want. Then when we had the meeting, like renewal meeting, she literally said to us, she started laughing, she was like, I've never let anyone have the freedom that you guys do with like what you do with your reads, because I'm actually listening to the show, she said. She's like, but we're profitable, so you're fine to continue. So it's like, exactly. Whereas they're probably sponsoring, I know they sponsor a lot of people doing similar stuff, but I reckon we get them a better return than most people.
Yeah, and if they're giving you the freedom, that's a sign that you are. I think so, because we've got like complete freedom with ours. Just do it in your voice because it's what works best, and it helps if they're listeners. And it's different, I suppose, with Riverside, which is kind of occupy the same space as you, whereas roofers don't occupy the same space as us, and lawyers, solicitors don't either. But
no, yours is very location based. Yeah. That is the beauty of a hyperlocal show, though, is you can then go. I mean, we were speaking on a previous episode, Leeds Business Podcast. Phil's approaching Leeds-based businesses because all of his audience are based in Leeds, or a large proportion of them. Yeah. For us, it's not location-based, but all of our audience are podcasters. So what do all podcasters need? Somewhere to record it.
Yes.
So it's just finding the right companies to sponsor you. I did notice you've already also sponsored by BetterHelp, and I think you've had ones with LinkedIn and these sort of things in the past.
They're all done through Acast. So
are they all done through Acast?
Yeah, so that's just on their AdCollab platform. They will just send through, do you approve this client? Yes. They'll send a script through, and then I tweak the script. Because like I say, I mean, this is no offense to the people who send them through, but you've often got sort of sales or marketing people writing scripts, I think, and what will translate to what works on air is different.
100%.
And it needs to be put in a human voice. Again, be human in your reads as well. Because what you'll find is you often get a script that comes through that's written in Microsoft Office language. Somebody who's sat down and written it. That's not how people speak.
No.
And again, going back to another radio lesson, like one of the things my old boss, Tom, kind of told me was speak like a human. Don't make DJ noise. People want to hear what you really sound like. You wouldn't, You wouldn't go in and say, "Hi, in 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you what this is," and so, you know, like that kind of DJ voice, you know, all that. And he knocks all that out of me. But it's so easy to do that, to imitate, because you think that's what people want. And it's the same with your script. Put them in human language and deliver them like a human would, as if you were sat face to face.
And the thing is, when podcasters are doing it, they might think, oh, they've paid me now, it doesn't matter. It's like, guess who's going to be more likely to pay you when that's up? Them again, if they get a return, rather than you finding another sponsor.
Yeah.
So
BetterHelp, we got 12 months out of, which is wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's been? Oh my god!
I was just going to say, and actually, I don't know where I sit morally on this one, but because I did have therapy, and I want to stress it was via the NHS that I had my therapy, but I can't say that on the read. But for the sake of clarity, I want to say that.
Yeah.
Not through them, but because I'm able to speak about it authentically,
Helps.
I think it's connected. Yeah,
100%.
But I do feel a little bit sort of morally ambiguous about doing that. But
why is that?
Because it's mental health, and I'm just a little bit wary of monetizing mental health things. Like we've done podcasts with Andy's Man Club as well.
That's it. Really weird. We had this exact conversation with Alex last week. He was saying how he hates people monetizing mental health.
Yeah, it's to me, But there's kind of part of me thinking, well, this is what's putting food on the table, and I know, you know, it'd be nice to be idealistic and purist about that, but that's the truth of the matter, is they're putting food on our tables. So, and I could deliver it in a kind of very scripted, formulaic way, or I could be truthful about it, and hopefully it connects. And
100% works better when it's being truthful, right?
Yeah.
Also, Mother Teresa she took donations from drug lords, so you know, money's money if it's going to help someone. But I've never used BetterHelp, but if it's actually a good product and they can actually help people, then I think. I personally think it's okay.
Which is interesting, because we turned down sponsorship from bookies. We won't work with bookies.
Yeah.
It's just, we could make a fortune from them, but we don't want to be part of.
I was thinking that when I was like, I wonder if they've ever had bookies approach them, because sports podcast.
We could have made tens of thousands out of bookies, but we've always said no. So there are some bookie adverts that run, so Acast dynamically serve their adverts, so we don't know what goes in, and they'll be served according to wherever you are geographically. So you may get a bookies advert,
but it won't be you endorsing it.
Yeah, but they've sold it, and they just serve it dynamically, and we don't know what's going to go into it until long after the event. You know, we get the invoice, the purchase order after the event. You can see who's been buying it, but it's kind of beyond our control. It'd be nice to be able to sort of control that, but with the platform as it is, we can't at the minute. Ideally, I'd rather not work with bookies, and that's why we've turned down every sponsorship approach. Particularly, we're recording at the time that the Euros are on as well, European Championships, and we get approaches from bookies heading into this, but we're just like, no.
Yeah, I bet you could probably earn like many tens of thousands this month easily.
But there's a line, and like I say, I think there are questions to be asked about endorsing a therapy service, but therapy is benign compared to gambling. And it's not to say I'm not against gambling. I don't gamble myself because I'll probably be terrible at it.
That's what makes it fun.
Let me introduce you to Ash.
When the fun stops, stop.
I definitely haven't put a pound bet on every single game of the Euros. I wouldn't have done that.
But yeah, so we're not here to be like moral guardians with anybody.
No,
we're there to do a podcast. But I think there's a line where I feel like we'd be contributing to a problem potentially if we were endorsing that. So if we can get by without that, then cool.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. So you've got the sponsorship, you've got the ads, you've got the merch, and you've got the TSB Plus. Do the merch and TSB Plus make more than your ads and sponsorship, or less?
Merch is about the same as we get from the sponsors, our own sold sponsors. It's about 17-20% of the overall business, something like that.
So they're all pretty evenly split.
Yeah, and it's a nice split, and that's one of the things that is good. So we can tend to the different areas to make sure that, so if we have a bit of a dip in one area, that it's offset by another.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got a really nice subscriber base that we like to look after. Also look after the free stuff. The merch, and just keep it nicely split, because I guess you can withstand any ups and downs that your football team might have. So we were a bit worried when Leeds got relegated last season that we might see a downturn, but actually it's gone the other way.
Really?
More than anything. Because people buy stuff and want to be part of wins. So the team won more games despite going down. So more people will engage and more people will buy things, yeah.
In your opinion, what's the best way to monetize a podcast? If you could only have one.
I would say look after your audio. We're in very much a video first world now. And I think you guys made a very good point actually on a recent show that I listened to, which was about everything else is controlled by algorithm. Audio is not, the algorithm's not as strong. So you can build a community in there, I think, with your audio possibly easier than you can cut through on video. Video is consumed more widely, but in terms of return, we get like 8 or 10 times more from audio than we do from video. So we make sure
Better listeners.
Well, the numbers are probably similar between YouTube and the audio.
Oh, that's what I mean. So as in like value per listener is better on audio.
8 or 10 times. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and people listen for longer. But that podcasting, it's like we were talking about radio before. Radio is a slightly passive medium in that you would have it on maybe in the office, in the car, something like that. Podcasting is very active. It's a very active medium. People choose to listen to you and engage with you and come into your world.
It's like a middle ground, isn't it? So it's not like you have to watch. You don't have to. You can do other stuff, but you actually take more attention. Of what you're listening to.
Yeah. So people who are going out for those dog walks might stick you on, or like I was saying to you before, and I listen to your episodes on a night time when I'm cleaning the kitchen up, because it normally takes me about 20 minutes, half an hour or whatever, so I'll get a couple of episodes in just while I'm loading the dishwasher.
When you're trying to get to sleep, you're like, put these two fuckers on.
They'll bore me.
Yeah, so yeah, just look after your audio and don't spread yourself too thinly. If you want to build an audience, just put your audience first, and it will look after itself eventually. Just make sure you know what they want. And I know that your business is will help people with smaller audiences to monetize them. But that's why you're here. And I built it in a different way over time with the other lads. And we're lucky. And we were talking about sport before. We've got a very defined audience. It's Leeds fans. It possibly could be self-limiting as well. I do appreciate that, but thankfully there are quite a lot of Leeds fans, and enough that we can put food on the table. And
there's probably not a fan base that are more bought into their football team in the world.
No, it's wild, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to explain to people who are outside it, and I'm not trying to be exceptionalist when Leeds are concerned, but that's what I thought way back at the start when I heard the Guardian's Football Weekly. Why can't we do this for Leeds? And just talk about Leeds, because Leeds fans are so self-absorbed with Leeds. It's their whole world, because I knew that was me. That's all I thought about, but it's still all I think about. Really.
You must not be feeling too good at the moment. I ain't.
So if you've got sponsorship, live events, ad networks at Acast, merchandise, membership, if you could only pick one of those monetization streams to keep.
It's hard, isn't it? I don't know how to answer it with a specific answer, because all I know is what got us to where we are now, and I don't think it's a magical formula. It's just kind of happened, not by accident, but we did it at the right time. But the audio for me is just look after the audio.
What, as in like audio ad network sponsorship on the audio?
Yeah, just make sure your show is consistent and good, and just stay the distance. Keep doing it. Get better at doing it. Because it will start bad, and then you get better as you go. Stick it out as long as you can. Again, put food on the table. Because if you're throwing all your efforts and your time into developing an audio thing that's just getting nowhere, then it does render it pointless, doesn't it? In the end,
of course. I think from the outside looking in, if you had to, where you are now, abandon all monetization strategies but one, I think keeping the TSB Plus, the membership platform, would be the best one to keep.
Yeah.
Because that's the one where in your episodes there's multiple asks for these different companies' sponsorship, but you don't really ask people to subscribe to that. So you could then just go, okay, all of a sudden our listeners aren't being hit by asking to do other stuff. We can ask a bit more for that.
Yeah.
So if you had to, you could go abandon sponsorship. Now let's ask people more for that, and then do some exclusives and really go all in on that to probably grow that more than you are. But you don't need to, because you've got the ads, and you probably don't want to be like, oh, they've already heard 4 ads. They don't want to hear me ask them to sign up to something.
You're right. We need to sell better. But we need to do it in a way that's not so selly.
That's the thing, because you've already got ads on there. For you, maybe not so much. Because if you're selling that as well, someone might be like, fucking hell, they advertised me at the start and at the middle, and now they're asking me to do this as well.
And again, going back to the lessons from radio thing, they keep popping back into my head, but sell the benefits as well. So the benefit of subscribing is you get it ad-free, and the ad loads are going up and up on Acast, plus the sponsor reads. They might be running sort of 2-3 minutes at the start of a show, because I'll upload the episodes and I'll think that's a lot longer when it's dropped into my Apple Podcasts app than I remember uploading.
Gets an extra 5 minutes from somewhere.
Yeah. So they're pumping it full of ads because it's a very desirable platform, isn't it? But so that's sell the benefits of what it is that you offer. So if you do have a membership tier, and I'm I basically could do with taking this lesson on board myself, but it's part of the plan of as we grow now. I need to buy my own time back a little bit. And if I can offer, because I still do most of the editing. I was
going to bring that up. You mentioned before, and I was very surprised with where you're at.
So we looked in 2023. We put out 298 episodes free and for members, and I think I edited about, I'm going to say 240 of them. So I'm spending a lot of time doing that. Now I can turn them around really quickly, and we have got to a point now where the show is so mature that we rarely make errors. So I'm just taking out the odd and R and maybe a mouth noise on a microphone, that kind of thing. So I can turn them around quickly, but it is a lot of dead time, like mixed downtime and publishing stuff on like Acast, and I also look after publishing stuff on YouTube. So yeah, that's probably where, if I can buy my time back there a little bit, I can spend more time on like selling the membership offering, I think.
With you having multiple income streams over 6 figures, so clearly the show's doing very well. Why is it taking you so long to get rid of the editing?
I suppose because the speed of growth has been quick as well. So income has like gone up exponentially over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. We need to make sure as well we don't take on too much and spread ourselves too thinly. And there's also the problem of giving stuff up as well. It's difficult.
Scary.
It's really difficult.
It's your baby.
Yeah, giving stuff up. So, you know, and we actually had a lesson that ran counter to that, which was when the merch company that we used to fulfill all our merch, when they went bust. It's like, shit, well, we've done this ourselves and we've saved $5,000 by, you know, on all their picking and packing fees and storage fees. But we're picking and packing ourselves. So out of the team of like 5 of us, is that time well spent if you're one of the team that's creating the podcasts, but you're also stuffing envelopes? But the merch offering, it only gets really, really hairy around Christmas. So the rest of the year, it's got to come in, maybe do 10 parcels a day, something like that. So it's not too imposing, but when you spread it out over the course of the year, I think we did, I'm going to say 6,000 and something merch orders we had in 2023. So it's quite a lot consistently over the course of a year. So yeah, we maybe need to just let some of those things go and just concentrate on being more strategic, I think, what it is. And like, I know the value from radio of cross-promoting your shows and services and things like that. It's an absolute obvious open goal, but perhaps haven't leaned into it so much just because, well, it's a capacity thing, being tired at the end of, you know, part writing, hosting, mixing down, editing a show, listening to it back, publishing that, making sure the video's dealt with, doing all that, and then getting to the end of the day and thinking, oh, shit, I didn't write a promo for this, or I haven't pulled a clip out of it that I could repurpose somewhere else in another show, you know, to cross-sell. Did it for a bit, but it kind of fell off, just down to capacity. So I think that's where we head next, is just if I can offload some of that, then we'll probably get better at selling the memberships, I think.
Who's the first person you hire?
Probably a producer, I think. Yeah, like a full-time producer.
Video or audio?
Audio. Yeah. We do have we've got a video editor who will be able to pull videos, and something we need to do better is the vertical videos. So he's there, and I can spend time on just sort of guiding him with that, and that'll kind of evolve over time. If I can get my time back from editing, spending 20 hours, 25 hours a week on that, and can just oversee that and start to guide him in the right direction, then we'll do that. And then maybe we look to put somebody else in that space who looks after social media. But I think we're just sort of wary of spreading ourselves too thinly financially as well.
Yeah.
But it's just, again, it's striking that balance. I think we'll find it. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I was just thinking perhaps you might get a young Leeds fan, perhaps at university or something like that. They could start potentially part-time. You get like a reduced rate because it's part of their work, and then get good maybe 3 years out of them, and then give them
absolutely. I mean, like, one thing that we're very anti is exploiting people as well. So we want to make sure that we pay well. So we've employed people, we've paid them well and looked after them, and give them plenty of holidays and things like that. So I don't think we want to necessarily exploit cheap labour, but there is an obvious kind of gap there to fill in there for a young person who is very social media focused. Whereas I'm not anymore. I don't spend much time on it because it just becomes too much.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm doing so much around the editing side of things. So yeah, I agree. Yeah,
we get pitched all the time, people like A-level, college, uni, and they need stuff for their portfolio or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, if they can get
placement students or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
And if they can get
We've
like 10,
spoken
15 grand or something over a year, it's
huge money.
Yeah, mad money to them.
Yeah. And especially if they're a Leeds fan and they're a listener of the podcast, which probably
that'd be no brainer.
Yeah.
Tell to me about sponsorships, because we don't talk much about ad networks just because of who our audience is. So I'm always interested to see what it's like dealing with them. So like, what can a podcaster expect in terms of CPM, onboarding? Like, just tell me everything about working with an ad network.
So Acast is kind of set and forget. You can tell them what sort of clients you will and won't work with. They will send through an approval. I actually got one when I was on the train on the way down. Do you want to work with this client? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Right. We'll send the script through. And then you get a script. You get like a week to turn it around, something like that. And within that script, you get guidelines about what's allowed Ofcom wise. I think it's Ofcom who police this stuff, or it'd be the ASA, the advertising people want it. We're outside Ofcom. What you can say, what you can't say, what they want read verbatim, the bits that you've got a little bit of scope to kind of do yourself. And those are the bits where you have fun and try and inject that little bit of personality and put it in your voice, even if it's just like a line or
something,
just a little bit of something to pull it into your universe.
So they know it's not completely scripted.
Like the BetterHelp ones, for example. BetterHelp, it's a private therapy service paid for, and if I can somehow find a link to pull it into the sort of football sphere, that will help. Don't always try and do it because it can sound forced, I think, sometimes. But it's a good example of a good challenge of trying to pull these people into your environment rather than just this sort of sterile read. Some of them you can't get around. I mean, there are some reads that you get where they do just want stuff verbatim, and you can do nothing but deliver it and hope that they come back again. But the ones that stick are the ones that you can kind of have a little bit of fun with. So they will send through a script, turn it around, and then you upload it on the back end of Ad Collaborator. So when you're on Acast, you've got about 4 or 5 tabs. There's like the Insights tab, which gives you all your metrics and all that. There's the shows where you upload your audio files. But the Ad Collab platform, they've spent time and invested in it, Acast, and it's getting better now. So you'll just get an email ping through saying you've got a read waiting for you. And then you just log onto the back end, download the script, upload the audio file, and they will approve it or not, ask for any tweaks, and then that will just go live. That's it. That's the end of the process. And then 60 days later, you get paid out from it, and you get a breakdown of the number of impressions.
Is it on a CPM model?
It is, yes. It's not laid out explicitly what the CPM they sell at. You just get through we've done this many impressions, and you've got this much revenue from it, so you can work out the CPM from it.
Have you ever worked it out?
Yeah, it's pretty high. I think we're... I want to say, and I should have had this figure with me, but I think it's about 15 quid, something like that.
15?
Yeah, something like that. But there's a split as well, so I think the split is 50-50 as well.
So it's 30, but they take half?
No, I don't. It might be 15. I honestly cannot remember.
No.
I know ad rates are going up at the minute, so I've not looked at it that closely.
Because
that's my honest confession.
No,
I've not, yeah.
It works great for a show the size of yours.
Yeah, volume. Yeah,
because we will speak to a lot of people where £15 CPM will be nothing.
Yeah.
Now, can't share exactly what it is, but like our sponsor is a lot more than that because of how specific they are to us. And I'm sure your Levi sponsor, if you was to work it out, would be a lot more than that as well, which is
we
where...
sell it at a higher CPM, yeah.
Exactly. So when we speak to clients and CPM model, for that, you like avoid it completely because until you're at a massive level, it's not going to make anything for you. But once you are at that point and you can just set and forget, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I was going to say the other side to it is that could be the ads I'm thinking of rather than the sponsorships, which are worth more.
Yeah.
They'll definitely be worth more.
They put them right at the start. I should have probably looked into this before That's right. I started recording. Yeah, but it is higher, but I don't know exactly what it is. Because I was going to say part of my other thoughts on all this is that you can get lost in numbers sometimes and don't beat yourself up over it too much. Keep an eye on them and look after the bits that work and tweak the bits that don't, but don't go episode to episode tearing your hair out about stuff. Look at longer trends.
Do you notice the episodes after, like the match ball episodes after Leeds lose, do a lot worse?
Yes.
Yeah, because I notice in my own listening habits, I don't tend to listen after we've lost.
Don't want to relive it.
But there is also kind of a misery loves company aspect to it. So the match ball, for anybody who's not aware, is we will walk straight from the stadium back to the studio, and within 20 minutes, half an hour, we do a live stream. And we do that live stream to our members only. We're talking about membership perks. That's one I forgot to tell you about. So that's members only. And then we put it out about 6 hours afterwards on the free feed for everybody else to consume. So you get priority access
so they
to
can
that.
engage with it. You get
And
comments.
again, so everybody who's in the chat there, and we use the streaming software we use. I know you've got one. You've got a client that uses a different platform, but Ecamm is the one that we use because it allows us to show comments on screen from the YouTube feed. So we will be guided in the episode based on what people are sending in. So I can sit there with the Ecamm feed in front of me and just say, right, Dave in Canada has said, what did you think of Patrick Bamford's performance today up front? And it gives us those jump off points, but it's so interactive. It gives us that means to make people feel loved as part of our world. So it's the special club.
So what people pay for and that sort of thing is just more access to you to be more involved, right? Yeah. So whether it's just an extra episode or they get to have an impact on episodes and you do like the player ratings, for example, these sort of things, what people want to play a part in, they'll pay that extra couple of quid.
Yeah, so the player ratings, we invite them to, it's like a password locked sort of online spreadsheet type thing. I don't know if it's a Google document or something, but rate the players out of 10. So
when we lose 1-1.
and it's hilarious how petty people can be with stuff like that. But it's pulling people into your world and making them feel part of it. So you give us your out of 10 scores, and we've run a little tiny feature, just a couple of minutes on each show across the year of who's going to be the player of the year. So these are the player of the year standings. So it gives that long-term buy-in right across the season. So people want to know who's going to get it. And it also it's a reward for the people outside the membership as well, because they can just sort of, there's well, which way is it going to go? There's a curiosity value there. But the people who are on the inside kind of get that buy-in because they are directing it themselves actively. So yeah, it's good. But to answer your question, we probably do about, let's say, 5,000 less on a defeat, but it does catch up over time.
So what are your total numbers for context?
So total numbers for the year, 6.5 million we did over the last 12 months.
Audio only?
That's audio only. Yeah, it's about 3.7 or 8 million on YouTube over the last 12 months. So yeah, it's about, so let's say we do a match ball after the match, we'll do about 20,000 immediately. If it's a victory, it'll get up towards 25,000, 30,000 quickly. Otherwise, it'll sort of just hover around 20 for a bit, maybe 18 if it's been a bad defeat. But this is what I was saying before about like when Leeds win more games, even though we're at a lower level, the numbers go up because people enjoy buying and being part of it when Leeds are winning.
I suppose one of the biggest challenges with a sports podcast is, I mentioned it earlier, I think before we started recording, being evergreen.
Yep.
Because you're reacting to a result or something in the press, which like I can go and listen to a 4-week-old episode now. It just wouldn't sit right because it's like, we're past this. I know what happens there. You're talking about this player. He's playing for us, for example. So, I feel like that could be a challenge because you can't bulk record. If you wanted to go away or something, you can't record 7-8 episodes and leave them to come out. You have to record after each episode.
Yeah.
How much of a challenge is that?
It is a challenge, but what we've done is really lean into streamlining everything. So the match ball. So do we want to spend time sending that off to a video editor who can then turn it around for us in a few hours and re-upload it with cuts between the cameras? No. So we put a 3-way split screen on in the studio, which allows us to put the comments on screen as well quite nicely. And, the sponsor logos in the top and the score up in the other top corner. So it's got that kind of very much of the now feel. So we can turn that around. So that involves no video editing. So we can put that out straight away. The audio, again, because it's a live stream, we don't have to edit the audio. So I just top and tail it, put the production on at the start and the end, find an ad point in the middle that's just a natural, decent ad point, put it out, and that's out immediately. So that involves almost no work and no turnaround. And we've tried to make that the case with as much that we do that's topical as well. Show with Phil Hay as well, that we've recently lost because Phil has moved on to Projects New. So Phil is or was the Athletics Leeds United beat reporter. Phil's now moved on to going to do a global newsletter for the Athletic. So he's left that role, but we did like 2 shows a week with him. So we'd come in on a Monday morning and I would just get him on like Zoom or whatever and record that.
Or Riverside.
Yeah, Riverside's fine as well.
I prefer Riverside in many ways, yeah.
Great. Cheers, Dan.
There's the ad, stick that in the beginning.
I say in many ways, in all ways. So,
you're not getting a cut pouch.
So what I will do is I will go home and I will look into Riverside as a replacement for Zoom.
Yeah, thank you. Remember to use the discount code in the show notes.
Please do text it to me and let me know what that is. So again, because we've reached a point of maturity in the show, is that I know that I can sit down with Phil on a Monday and just have a chat for 20 minutes, half an hour, and it will need no editing, almost. Just the smallest edit. And I edit at about 1.5 or 2 times speed now. Yeah. So I can turn stuff around really, really quickly. So my Monday, I will be in at like, let's say 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'm done by 1 o'clock on that day. So I can just go home or go for a swim or whatever. So yeah, streamlining everything as much as possible. And then the evergreen stuff is a challenge, but it's something we became aware of this last year. But again, capacity problems mean we didn't, and the number of fixtures in the championship mean that we didn't properly sort of serve this enough. So what we would do is we had a palette cleanser show, if you like, which was an evergreen show called the Square Ball Guide to ... and then it would be a guide to a player, a moment, a goal, a tackle, even and go for YouTube friendly lengths as well, under 20 minutes where possible, and just talk about a specific incident. And we can then bank all those for those kind of repeat listens and repeat views and stuff like that. And it's just like, so we've got the match reaction at the start of the week. We do the match ball on the same day as the match, let's say Saturday or Sunday. Then Phil would come on a Monday and give us the more considered, we've had a day to think about it, press view.
Get the Leeds fans view, and then you get the
So
reporters view.
Yeah, shooting from the hip. Oh my God, we've come out of the stadium full of adrenaline. What was that like? And we will talk about that for half an hour. But then Phil gives us the cool-headed, arm's-length view of it on Monday. Then we would do propaganda. Now I need to talk about propaganda as a show because this was one we hit on completely by accident. But then we do the TSB guides on a Wednesday. But what we found is there are so many more championship fixtures on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night that just kind of chuck the whole thing up in the air. You just don't have the time to do as many as you want. But the guides were a nice palate cleanser before you head into the next weekend of previewing. And you would have Phil on to preview the next show. Or we do the sort of weekly roundup. That's the stuff we haven't spoken about on the show that week. But yeah, the championship is so relentless because there are 46 fixtures plus the rest. So it's like weekend, midweek, most of the year. So like when the international breaks come around like 6 times a year, we're like, we just need to have like a few days off here because this is too much. Yeah. Rather than putting out the evergreen stuff. And because we're so flat out with the topical stuff, not getting the evergreen stuff in the can to release it in those breaks. So it kind of you end up in this sort of vicious circle of not putting things out. But yeah, the evergreen stuff is stuff we're going to work on. And hopefully in future, even though Phil's moved off the topical covering Leeds United angle, we'll be able to go back and do some evergreen stuff with him about the sort of 18 years he spent covering Leeds. But yeah, it's a challenge. It is a challenge because so much of what you do, it's throwaway and disposable and it's gone within days.
Yeah, it's a very different type of podcasting because there's some advice we give to most people is make content people can go back and listen to. Yeah. Because if you sell sponsorship on your first 6 episodes, you can say, well, most people come back to the first episode and it makes it more valuable. So there's reasons to lean into it, but then it's completely different for you. But I'd say the other side of it is I'd say it's easier to grow and get that virality when you're topical, right? Because we do some topical episodes, we try and keep most of them evergreen, but the topical ones tend to get to numbers quickly. Yeah. But then obviously the evergreen ones climb a little bit over time.
What was it like in 2010 with podcasting? Like, how is it different now? Like hosting sites,
it was all fields.
On iTunes.
It was all fields. Yeah. I remember when all this was fields. It was in black and white. No, it was different. It's probably one of the better things I've done was to anticipate where this might go. But at the time, it was sync your iPhone, your new shiny iPhone that's like, it's been out 3 years. Look at this thing. Syncing it up to iTunes with the stupid cable.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day.
The big 30-pin cable at the bottom, which it frayed within about 6 months. But yeah, it was sync your phone up to your computer and download this stuff. I mean, we got the first fortnight, we got 2,000 downloads. In
2010?
Yeah.
That's all right, that.
Yeah. But it was coming off the back of that famous victory at Old Trafford, so there's kind of a hook on which to hang it. And it never went backwards from there, really. And we kind of, like I say, it fell off a little bit when I was doing the radio full time because I just couldn't do both. And it was only when that kind of was coming to an end I thought, shit! Yeah. We need to make this work. But yeah, it was different. It was... Yeah, but the other side to that is that it was more labour intensive putting the episodes together. So I remember that first episode, and I listen to it now, and I sound like my balls have dropped since. I go back, it's like, why was my voice so squeaky? And I don't know if it's the radio station processing or anything like that where we used to be, or whether I've just become more comfortable in my own voice, or I've just got older and my vocal cords have changed, or whatever it might be. But I sounded so, like really high pitched.
Excited.
Yeah. So it took about 2 hours to get the first one in the can, and it was just free form and shit, quite frankly. And then I had a decent enough editing ear to know how to squeeze that down. I think I got it down to about 45 minutes, something like that, and just tried to pick out the good bits. But it was a little bit awkward. It was a little bit forced trying to hit up on the good stuff, and you want to keep the good stuff and dispense with the rest. Now, all these years later, we know what the good stuff is, and we can lean into it a lot more. And it's not always 9 or 10 out of 10. Most of the time, it's 7 out of 10, and that's fine. Yeah. As well.
It's good enough, right?
As long as you can occasionally get the 8s and the 9s, maybe even the occasional 10 where you finish and you go, I nailed that. It's great. It's such a good feeling when you know you've done that.
I meant to say it a minute ago, but I forgot. I discovered the Square Ball through the Phil Hay podcast. So tell me a bit about how that came about.
Right, yeah. So that was hosted on the Athletics platform. The Athletic has just been bought by the New York Times, but it was kind of a startup disruptor, venture capital backed sports organisation. I mean, if you wanted to be really unkind about it, it was basically just a glorified blog with an absolute boatload of money behind it. And they had to burn through all this seed capital. And what happened was Phil left. So the Athletics model was to hoover up all the local football journalists from the local newspapers, and their owners at the time, their stated aim was to put newspapers out of business. And we know print struggles versus, new media now and video and YouTube and everything. But they wanted to kill it. And so they went to the Yorkshire Evening Post, which is the big newspaper in Leeds, and said, we will take your football reporter and he will come to us. And their model was very much longer form, think pieces, backed by bigger budgets. So Phil, I remember, went off to Poland to go spend some time with the family of one of the Leeds players, Matejs Klich. Got this brilliant story. And they spent all their money, I think, all their seed capital, and burned through it, trying to hoover up audience, which is what they got with Phil, because Phil at the time had like 150,000 Twitter followers or whatever.
Wow.
And he grew his audience at a time when the club didn't have a Twitter following, because the owner, the malevolent Chelsea one, didn't believe in social media, thought it was a force for ill, which is mad when you think about it.
Yeah.
So Phil grew a tremendous audience. They bought up audience. They tried to buy us, did The Athletic. So at the time when Phil went to them, I got approached by a guy based out of California, said, love what you do. And I can't remember if it was actually Phil who said, if you're looking for podcasts that you want to get involved with, speak to these guys. And they tried to buy us right back at the start. And then for months, the trail kind of fell silent. And this is at the same time when I was in the process of getting made redundant, by the way. So I'm kind of thinking, like, please get in touch soon so I know where this is going to go, because suddenly you see you're going to dangle potentially some money in front of me. Is this going to dig me out of this redundancy hole? Anyway, offer came in. They offered us about 30-something thousand pounds for the whole business, and they wanted to carve it up where they didn't take the merch, and we could keep the merch, but they'd get the name and the podcast audience, and they wanted the Twitter following as well. I think we had about 80 or 90,000 maybe at that time, something like that.
What year was that?
2019. So it was summer 2019, heading into that autumn winter. And in the end, the offer was just not good enough for us. Like, if we'd have carved it up 5 ways, we'd have ended up with 5 or 6 grand each, and we've given it up forever then.
Yeah.
And we've surpassed any level that we.
I bet you're glad you didn't sell it now. The sort of money you're making.
It never came into the thinking.
No.
If they'd have gone, well, here's 6 figures for this. But the guy's reasoning was just like, you've got 1 year of good earnings, but there's nothing else to back it up. Like, okay, fair enough. So I ended up just saying to him on the phone, look, this is not going to go any further. Should we just make some podcasts? And he said, yeah, all right then. So he put me in touch with the guy who was running the podcasts at the Athletic headquarters and said, right, you have the number 1 Leeds podcast. We want to make one with Phil. Do you want to kind of produce this for us and host it? So I ended up hosting it. So it sounded like one of our shows, same production and all that kind of thing, but it was just on their platform. So
brought you a lot of listeners, I should imagine, because I remember hearing it, and it was, hey, it's Dan from the Square Ball, and then they stopped uploading. You stopped uploading the Phil Hay show. When I went back to watch, I was like, oh, they've not uploaded in months, and I was like, what did he say the name of his show was? The Square Ball, and then found the Square Ball.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, when they said you can come and do this and you can make it like a co-production, I was like, well, brilliant. Absolutely. It's free advertising to all that market. And Phil is a really good guy, has given us loads of his time and helped us build something. He's been a real cornerstone of our growth. Being able to slipstream him effectively with that audience. And Phil never particularly pushed out the podcast as such, but if we did clips, we made clips of the shows and put them out on socials, Phil would give it a retweet. So it just gives you that traction, and his audience followed to us when we brought it in-house. But yeah, that ran for, I think it was like 3 years or something, 3.5 years, and did huge numbers. Some of the episodes there hit like 40,000 listeners there,
really?
Massive.
Wow.
But unfortunately, for reasons that The Athletic would be able to tell you, they couldn't monetize that show.
Really?
Yeah. In the same building as Acast, I would like to add as well. Yeah. They were on the floor downstairs. You could have just walked downstairs.
They'd probably have given you some money for it.
You just do what you do, but for us. But I think because at that point, they had their in-house sales teams and wanted to kind of monetize it themselves. For whatever reason, they were not able to.
It's mental how much opportunity there is out there. We've spoke to countless podcasters with huge audiences, like similar sort of size to yours, who are like, oh, yeah, we might stop, so it's not keeping the lights on. You're like, you what? We work with podcasters with hundreds of downloads making hundreds of thousands. Yeah. And there's people with hundreds of thousands of downloads making nothing. And it's wild. It's just
I think
knowing.
It's legacy media as well, though, isn't it? Because they have in-house sales teams, and the New York Times have now bought The Athletic, and it's looking much more like a legacy media organisation where they've pivoted more towards less these long-form interesting stories and more kind of, let's talk about what Mbappe is going to do at Real Madrid. The kind of the real headline grabbing. It's numbers, just pure, plain and simple. And everybody's chasing numbers, and they're just chasing the numbers now in a slightly different way than they did before. But what comes with legacy media organisations, and I know this as somebody who worked for one when I was doing the radio, is like it's money is king, and if they can make something more efficient, they will try and make something more efficient. That normally means job losses and streamlining things, and often worsening the product. But at the end of the day, that's their problem, isn't it? And they've moved Phil over to do what he does. But they were kind enough with the audio team at the Athletic to say this. We don't necessarily want to lose this show, but there's just no budget for external third-party deals anymore. So we can't pay you to do this anymore because there's just no budget for it anymore. So it has to stop. Even though I think at one point I heard anecdotally it was in their top 10 global podcasts, and they killed it.
We interviewed Meghan Markle's producer from Spotify. I think we got to the bottom of it pretty easily, as they had like 30 people running on that team. They had 2 runners for like one host. Is that I think they just overspend so much because that legacy media, like big corporates, it's like, we have to have a massive production.
Yeah.
Whereas like you'll know is that, you'll just edit this massive podcast of 10 million downloads a month on the train from Leeds to Peterborough and like make way more profit than this massive corporate podcast.
Every clip's got to go through a hoop, and by that point it's old news. Like it's. And it was, her perspective on the podcast was, it's going down, which was very surprising to us. But then we realised she looks at it from a very different angle.
Yeah.
Because the sort of podcasters we're seeing, it's becoming more popular for these independent podcasters, but that are doing it well.
Yeah.
Whereas the celebrity podcast, people are now seeing the other side of it. It's like, it was cool for a bit. Now it's like every celebrity's got a podcast and don't really care anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's about forming that relationship, isn't it? And that long-term buy-in. And while it's great to have celebrities on your podcasts, it's far more transactional because you'll dip in and leave it. Because although I know people love celebrity and celebrity gossip, but do they love celebrities?
You never build that real relationship with them, though, do you? Whereas you can with an independent host, or with you guys, people can probably feel a lot more like a fly on the wall of a conversation and not more engaged in it than they would listening to a celebrity podcast who they know wouldn't give a toss if they were listening or not.
How intimate audio is as well as a medium.
Yeah,
like we all use like these nice mics that give us that sort of bassy, that present feeling, and often it'll be with AirPods in or headphones or whatever, and you are right there in the room with that person. It's a really personal medium, is audio. And that's not, again, going back to radio learnings again, so apologies for repeating myself, but it was always talk to one person, because you're often talking to a listener. Or if not like you, hi you guys, and you see it on YouTube all the time. Right, guys, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. But with audio, you're talking to one person.
That's good.
Even if there are other people in the room, you are still talking to one person because one person hears it. That's their experience of that podcast. So we always try and talk to the listener or the viewer rather than all you lot. Occasionally it slips out. We're not perfect. But,
we say often about being a fly on the wall in a conversation is the best feeling when listening to a podcast. As though like either you're not there or they're talking to you. One of the two. Because if you're a fly on the wall in a conversation which just feels natural, it's a much better feeling than it's like, I want a big TV set. No one wants to feel like that. Don't want to feel. And that's why I think people started moving towards podcasting, is you get all these BBC interviews, or football is the worst for it. You interview them after the game, they all say the same thing. And as soon as someone's a bit out there and says something different, the media get hold of them. In 3 months, they're saying the same thing as well. So I think that's why people like podcasting. And I remember showing my dad the other day, I think it was the Stick to Football podcast, or one of the ones with the pundits. But like, they're dropping F-bombs, they're talking about these stories from an England camp. And he was like, what? Like, I'm used to these guys being on Sky Sports TV, all suited and booted, like being very...
100%, yeah. And it's the space that we've the wedge that we sort of moved into that has grown and grown and grown, like fan-led media. Like there's some huge ones out there, like multi-million pound businesses that are way beyond what we've done. Like you look at Arsenal Fan TV.
That's the big one, isn't it?
Yeah, huge teams of people. But even like solo people like, Mark Goldbridge, who's one of the big ones. Yeah. I mean, I could never do what he does. And, the sort of very performative kind of stuff, because I don't think you can do the amount of stuff that we do and keep up a character like that. I couldn't do it.
No, 100%.
Which is what I feel like he's doing. It's 95% us with a sort of 5% embellishment on top. But yeah, it's a really interesting space that we kind of, as the gatekeepers have fallen away, like radio and papers and things like that, and the clubs have become more sterile and far removed and elite, and all the players are media trained. There's this space in the middle where you can reflect how people feel, and I think that's the one big thing. And you were talking earlier about the topical aspect of sports podcasting and how it's difficult because it's yesterday's chip paper very, very quickly. But what you can do more than anything is capture how people feel. And another one of the radio things was it's the heart, hand, head principle. And this stuck with me so much. It's such a good idea. what people want and what your audience wants, if you're putting them first, is they want to have something rewarded. Audiences are fundamentally selfish, not in a mean way, but they want you to serve their needs and fit around their routine and give you something. So the heart is how you feel. You make them feel something. Mm. The head is you give them some knowledge. And the hand is you give them a prize or a thing, monetary reward of some description. Now, we can't do the monetary reward side very often. Radio does it very, very well. So if you ever hear like radio stations now, it's all premium rate texting, isn't it? In among all the DJ chatter. So it depends where you are, where you position yourself in all that. But if you can remember to serve your audience with one of those three things, you're going to start ticking boxes. If you can do all three, you've nailed it. Or if you can get at least two. So we try and tap into what it feels like to be a Leeds fan on that day, in that week, and just completely lean into that. It's all about how it feels. And that's something that the clubs can't do themselves. Yeah. Something that like the old legacy media can't do either.
It is a massive gap, like you say, is relating to people. Because you can talk to the people down the pub, but I don't live in Leeds. So I can talk to my dad, who will just complain. But then it's like, you kind of want more of that. Yeah. As if I'm in the stadium talking to people. Well, and then listening to that podcast is the closest I can usually get to it.
From being a football fan, it's a shared experience, isn't it? 100%. And it's being part of a tribe. So if you can, and it talks, it speaks to that idea of pulling people back into your world, because you've got a tribe there. So you just need to kind of, put yourself at the centre of that tribe, I suppose, if you like, is just make people feel part of something. And it does translate into like business podcasts as well. So if you can tap into the kind of whatever niche it is that your podcast deals with, is address the issues within that particular niche, the common experiences that you always find, and speak about them and overcome them and work on them together, and be self-aware about these things and acknowledge that you're speaking about these problems. Just tap into little things like that, reflect that experience of the listener, who's going to go, yes, I recognize that. And that's what they want more than anything, I think, is the people that sit there and host it is to relate to them and to relate to their experiences. I think that's where the magic happens, for me anyway.
Awesome. Quick one. Angus Kinnear, you managed to get the CEO of Leeds on every year.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Just through speaking to the press office and just pressing the flesh more than anything.
So you requested, they didn't reach out to be like, oh, can we come on every year? You actually reached out to be like, hey, what would it take to get the CEO of Leeds United on?
Yeah, just asked. and got him. Yeah, and he apparently enjoys doing it. And we, I've got to know him a little bit off air when we've recorded. Don't speak to him particularly frequently, but that's a huge, that's our biggest show of the year.
Oh, I bet.
By multiples.
But that's a perfect example of he's only ever been interviewed by the press where he has to say specific answers. Yeah. The chance to actually sit down and have a conversation about what's really going on. Yeah. It's what every Leeds fan wants to know. It's like, he's the person in charge of the club.
And nothing's ever off the table. I need to say that as well. People think that they filter the questions when it comes to that, and nothing is ever off the table.
Yeah, he's very open, and you'd think there must be a lot of clubs out there where they would never touch that. So respect to him for that, to be able to step on the show and get grilled, especially last year with the shit show that went on. He must have gone to that show knowing I'm going to absolutely grill there.
But again, speaking to him about that, and Leeds got relegated, for anybody who doesn't know. So he was the guy who essentially came on and owned it. Came on the show and owned it. Yeah. And there was a transition in ownership last summer. So there was almost a bit of a vacuum of information between the outgoing ownership that oversaw the relegation and the San Francisco 49ers who came in and took over, who are a lot more corporate and very switched on. But weirdly, their media people are quite in tune with what we do, and they're interested in speaking to us and keeping a dialogue open. But yeah, it was the chance for the club to come on and say, look, we didn't get this right. We're sorry, and hopefully we've learned the lessons from it. And I think Angus appreciates the voice that we have. And you're going back to what you want to get out of a podcast. It's like, know your podcast's voice as well. And ours is one where we're the biggest idiots in the room, I suppose. Rather than positioning ourselves as the voice of authority, you kind of earn people's respect. I think it's really important to do that. By acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. And you see so much fan media, what I'm getting at is...
That's what's relatable, though. Yeah. It's like the person listening feels like they're just talking to another Leeds fan, not someone who's, I heard from the club this week. It's like someone else who's just experienced the same thing as you.
Yeah, because if I went on and said, Angus Kinnear is the worst CEO in football, week after week after week, what is he doing? That doesn't necessarily... life is not black and white, is it? It's full of shades of grey. And your opinions can waver and move. And that's about authenticity, I suppose. So why go for a really polarizing opinion just to hoover up numbers when, the tortoise and the hare principle, I suppose, is just be normal and be authentic and speak how people speak, reflect how they genuinely feel and the conversations they would have. And we challenged him on some of the stuff that he said and done. Like he did program notes, for example, which didn't always land particularly well. So we questioned him about the program notes, and he said, well, I'm just trying to provide a form of entertainment. I realised they haven't really hit that well, but there you go. And it humanises him as well in the process.
100%.
So, yeah, so that's been a really, really interesting thing. And as the audience has grown, the club have become more aware of the fact that I suppose they can't control us either, like in the same way they could draw access to, other parts of the media.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been a really weird but kind of fun journey, is realising that we've got a voice and they're aware of it.
Fair play. So, Dan, you host a podcast which gets millions of downloads a year, millions of views on YouTube, generates hundreds of thousands of pounds. What would be your main piece of advice to someone looking to start a sports podcast?
Again, know your audience. Yeah, which is helpful because it's already there. You can find it. The community exists. And I know you guys speak about going into communities and building a community around what it is that you do. You've got one already for a sports team, and they will use the sports team's hashtags. It's an absolute gift. It's an open goal. Go out there and cultivate that space and be part of it. And don't go in there swinging your dick around, for want of a better phrase. Just be normal and try and reflect those normal conversations. And it goes back to authenticity. Be authentic. Find where the audience is and get in amongst it and become part of it.
Being relatable as well.
Yeah, just put the work in to become part of that space. Yeah, so if there are existing sports podcasts within that space, that's your audience. Go after them. Yeah, go try and be a guest on that show, or say we've started a new show. Could you come and be a guest on ours? And it's the networking thing, isn't it?
Being brave.
Yeah, people in the same space, and the worst that can happen is someone will say no, but you'll be surprised at how many times people say yes.
Nice.
Where can people find you?
You can find us with the Square Ball on all sorts of social platforms, but you can search the Square Ball on your podcast app if you want to listen to the audio version. We're on YouTube as well. So yeah, and apologies for the lead stuff in advance. It's not for everyone, but we have fun doing it anyway.
We have a couple of Leeds fans who listen. I'm sure they'll enjoy it.
Good.
Dan, thank you very much, mate.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.